You need to wake up to this. The recent UK election and the rise of the Labour Party seems to have accelerated something that we've seen in places like Canada already, and that's kind of a changed racial and gender politics that throws the fundamental of Great Britain under the bus to reconstruct the nation in a new leftist image. Seeing what the last month has been like in the UK under Keir Starmer, I couldn't help but go back to some of the most profound predictions that Jordan Peterson made about British politics. So subscribe to the channel for more discussions like this and watch what Jordan said before I tell you more about it.
I think it'll be catastrophic. I believe that Labour, like the socialist parties in Canada, is absolutely overwhelmed by the diversity, equity, and inclusivity, victimizer narrative types. And that even if Starmer himself has any sense, which I doubt, the probability that his minions will lay waste to the UK it's certain in my estimation. And if the Labour gets in, and I can understand why the citizens of the UK are hungry for a change. If Labour gets in, it's like Venezuela, here we come. I think at minimum, the UK will probably manage to overtake Canada as worst performing developed country over the next 4 decades if they're foolish enough to elect a Labour government. And that's quite a, what would you say, an opponent to overcome, given the state of our leadership in Canada.
Here's the deal. On the face of it, the UK has been ruled by the Conservatives for the past decade, plus only ended by a landslide victory for the Labour Party 2 months ago. And yet, whichever way you look at it, both parties have consistently failed to deliver on their charter, with even the more conservatives in the UK championing traditionally left-wing politics since the Overton window has shifted so far. There's a vast swath of the population that just doesn't relate with the identity-based politics being exploited out of the places like the US, and have consistently shown that have a significant percentage of the public not identifying with ideas like feminism, multiculturalism, and open borders. And that's not even a statement of whether that's right or wrong, that's a statement about the disconnect that has existed between the British public and their leadership for over a decade, with its extreme ends spilling out into violent riots as we saw last month. That's not a good sign for the health of British democracy, much less when the new Labour government isn't even hiding the fact that they plan to bring in even more left-wing policies on things like taxation, DEI, economy, and immigration. Unfortunately, someone like Keir Starmer's distance from the public is demonstrated in the recent tensions over the country when he used an overly broad term to describe all the protests that far-right thuggery. That's a kind of language that only serves to aggravate people rather than making them part of the fold and cool things down, even if you vehemently disagree with their cause. That's an interesting case study into how unlikable leadership at the top can create a wedge between the ruling class and public, and Nigel Farage also made this observation.
What do you think a Labour government will do to the UK?
Yeah, I mean, Keir Starmer has no leadership qualities whatsoever. He is devoid of any sort of charisma at all. And people do need a leader, that inspires them to a certain degree. He's kind of doing well because he's not the Conservatives, and there is revulsion. There is revulsion at them, a sense of betrayal about them. On the face of it, his manifesto on climate change is almost identical to the Conservatives. His manifesto on economics is almost identical to the Conservatives. But I think we know that what we'll see is trans ideology in the ascendancy. We'll see more legislation designed to divide us up into different groups rather than bring us together as human beings equal before the law. I look at his potential front bench of the top ministers. I see very little competence whatsoever. He's almost going to win by default, as opposed to, a big enthusiastic wave of support. And so in some ways, I think there's every opportunity for this just to be a one-term Labour government. There'll be no honeymoon. There'll be no sort of after-victory glow. He faces a big set of problems, the ones I mentioned earlier, the population explosion, the fact our public services don't work, the fact young people can't get a house and even their rents take up over half of their income. And he won't have the solutions to any of it.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it? It's been a common thread from the US under Biden, Canada under Justin Trudeau, and now perhaps even Keir Starmer in the UK. That's because the United Kingdom almost stands at a similar juncture as Canada did back in 2015. It was ruled by the Conservatives in Canada for nearly a decade, and yet they could hardly represent and channel their base in the political sphere, making the right in the country feel aggravated. Then came in someone like Justin Trudeau, and we all know how that turned out for Canada in the last decade. And the growing schism between the people desire and what the government delivers is only going to create more instability and unrest moving forward. For example, time and time again, polls and voting patterns have shown over the last decade that UK citizens want to lower the speed of immigration into the country, and despite the fact that both Conservatives and now the Labour Party have been in power, immigration has only been on a rapid increase. That leads to disillusionment in the entire political system. Then people feel like they are not being heard, and recent neoconservative anti-immigration parties, like the Reform Party, are capitalizing on that sentiment in the UK. That disconnect between power and the public sounds familiar, but what's sad is that the UK's value structure and political philosophy, which is spread across the world, has somewhat of a sentimental value for it. For someone like Jordan Peterson, that's the real loss of this entire endeavor that people are missing.
It probably did the most effective job of any modern state of translating the narrative structure of the Judeo-Christian biblical corpus into policy. And it did that partly explicitly in its parliamentary structure, but it also did it even more wisely with its common law tradition. I mean, English common law is a complete bloody miracle. Bottom-up law. I mean, God, what a phenomenal accomplishment. And so, yes, I think that makes Britain singular and worthy of tremendous admiration, whereas the Brit system is bottom-up, and the respect for the common man isn't an empty phrase in Great Britain. And you can tell that when you go there. I mean, I love that country. It's a great country. It's a country that's suffering from far too much guilt at the moment. Which I suppose in some ways is even a testament to its moral soundness.
You know why? Guilt is an incredible manipulation tactic, and gaslighting and guilt-tripping an entire nation about its values and its past are effective ways of trying to deconstruct it and shape a new image. Right now, it seems like the project in the UK has only just begun. Let me know in the comments how you view it, because it's certainly going to take a lot of rethinking to set straight the trajectory of one of the most important countries in the world.